Welcome back to Inclusion Revolution here on Eastlink Television, and we're being joined by Jackie Thornhill, who is an advocate for persons with mental health. She is herself a person living with mental health, and we've been discussing the stigma, but I really want to talk about how Jackie overcame that stigma and really turned herself into a community advocate and somebody who really makes a difference in her community. And whether you have disability or not, I think making a difference in your community is very important to us here in the Maritimes and across Canada. So Jackie, tell me something. How do you go from being that person who's not feeling well, who's dealing with those issues, who's been identified, and then turns it around and says, I'm not going to be this classic mental health stigma myth?
No.
Because it is a myth.
Yeah.
And how you become a leader in your community. How did you transition that?
Well, the kind of values that I had growing up were, hard work and, kind of being passionate about something and doing what I wanted to do. And my parents always encouraged me to, kind of find something that I would be happy doing.
And good for your parents, because encouraging is so important, and we're very grateful to them for that.
And I think they made a lot of sacrifices to kind of pave the way for me to be able to do that.
Okay.
So even though I was still struggling, I still had this passion inside of, wanting to do something that.
And you had this great support system in your parents who really understood and wanted to support you to do that, and that's huge.
And the best ways that they could, we all have our challenges, but they definitely wanted me to get better and to succeed for sure. So I guess the gist of it is that while I was in the process of recovering, while I was seeking treatment in the mental health system, I pursued volunteer opportunities, and basically I tried, I was getting to the point where at first I was, I went through a period of homelessness and of having a lot of instability in my life, because it's really hard to make decisions when you're not well, so sometimes you don't always make the best decisions.
And that's a really good point to make. It's not like people are necessarily even aware that decision would lead to where it did, especially in that condition.
So once I was able to, have a stable kind of schedule, and I had my appointments, and I had, the things I needed to do for my mental health, there was all this time that was left over that, needed to be filled with something. And so, I kind of looked really hard for the right opportunities, and I was careful about what I chose, because
Tell me why, because that's an important message. Why? Because I, for instance, had a client who was living with mental health, who wanted to volunteer at the NS hospital, Nova Scotia Hospital, because she really, really felt connected to those challenges. But we weren't sure it was the best place for her, because it could also be a very emotional and very difficult environment. So tell me, for you, how you were able to make those good choices.
Well, basically, I really felt like I needed to match whatever I did with what my future goals were. So rather than just looking at something that was going to get me through the next year, I needed to look at, a pathway into the area that I wanted to work, which was social work. And that was really solidified for me, watching the people go through the things I was going through, and seeing how people who were in roles of professional support and help, how they responded. And so it really, lit a fire in me to kind of want to be that kind of person.
Right.
And so when I started looking for opportunities, I started looking for opportunities in that area, and looking at things that would be ideal in terms of me getting accepted to a school of social work and finding a career. So, which brought me, to working at the Lesbian, Gay, and Bisexual Youth Project, and then do an internship with Reachability, and then also working at Adsum House and a few other organizations during my time at the School of Social Work doing my BSW. So it happened very quickly. Once I kind of was on that path, it happened quickly.
It's amazing once you get the ball rolling.
Yeah. But the important thing I had to remember was that I had to pace myself, and that while I was in school full time and working part time and doing an 8-month placement with Alexa McDonough, who's the MP for Halifax, I was simultaneously going to therapy on a weekly basis, and
you were juggling a lot.
Yeah,
I think maybe a lot more than I might advise clients, kind of getting out there to do. So good for you for not listening to me, but well, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, it was, it's priorities for me, right? I didn't want to be 35 and still wondering what I was going to do. and I also had to, prioritize my health. And thankfully I've had a lot of really supportive faculty members at the School of Social Work, employers, friends, therapists.
So that whole transition period has been with the support of people who basically got it.
Yeah, and there were times when I had to educate people a bit. There were people who resisted me kind of going down this route so quickly and kind of were like, I don't know if you're ready. And I would say, you know what, like, just because I have this history or these experiences doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I can't do this or that.
Right.
Like, everybody has their own things that they're working on.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate to have those people who were willing to listen and understand and believe in me. And I still have people who believe in me, which is a really awesome thing to have.
So what I'm hearing is, number one, the support system is key. From day one, from point one. Having the right people around you, people who get who you are, who honor you for who you are, and support you as you try to move forward. Whether that's teachers, whether that's family, whether that's friends. So I'm hearing that's a really key part, because I obviously want to translate your success to people who are listening and going, well, what about me? And I'm saying, I see that as being a really important step, surrounding yourself with people who get it. And if they're not necessarily all around you, and you were very blessed to have such a supportive environment, then it's about going out and finding the people who get it. But I have to ask you, with that in mind, what are some of the really common myths that you faced with very intelligent people who were very supportive potentially, but share with us some of the myths for our listeners and our viewers in terms of what they might see, or for their kids or for the people they love. What are some of the myths we'd like to dispel?
Well, I think a primary myth is that people who have mental illness shouldn't be included in major decisions about their own lives, and that that something needs to be done to them to fix them, when I think that most people respond better when they're included in those decisions, and when
that myth that we're going to make the decision and tell you how it goes, rather than that inclusion of the person who it obviously affects most of all. So that was one, And then
also that that people with mental illness can't be active citizens. They can't be people who, contribute to their communities. That
they're not going to be able to, or something.
They're always going to be people who receive services. They're never going to be people
they're takers, not givers, in terms of society.
And I mean, I see every day in the work I do people who are incredibly resilient and who contribute so much to their communities, and yet they're kind of believed to be people who are taking from the community.
So that's a huge myth.
Yeah, and they're not. I mean, they're active. They're participating in all kinds of volunteer work, employment, regenerating income, and money back into the community by participating in all kinds of things, and then using their income to support the causes in the community. I mean, they're
just
givers.
Like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the myths, that somehow we're not like everybody else, but yet everybody at some point will live with a disability. Everybody at some point will know somebody who lives with some form of mental health, whether that's severe depression or anything else that we hear about. And for me, the greatest myth is to somehow think it's got nothing to do with you. Individuals. And I really appreciate you sharing some of those myths, because I think that so many people hear them but don't realize that other people hear them too. There's this sense that I find in the community where people feel very isolated by their mental health, when we've all experienced it, and those of us who've experienced mental health at different levels have an understanding, and we want to make sure everyone out there knows they're not alone. And I think that's one of the things I know you do, in not only your work, but just in your very essence. And that's something we appreciate. Well, I think you're doing a pretty good job. So that's really important to me. So where you are today is you're a person who now is making sure that other community members are getting, people living with mental health are getting that expertise that you provide, that understanding, and of course that self-awareness that you have that is very unique to people who have lived with this type of disability and the stigma that surrounds it. So I want you to keep being the ambassador that you are, and thank you for doing that for us.
I fully intend on making a career of this. So
well, good. We don't want to lose
what I want to do.
We were doing a show recently about social services and the importance of getting diverse community members involved, and you're certainly a great example of that. And for that, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank Connections Clubhouse for allowing you to come to see us today. And I also want to thank everyone for sitting and listening to us, because I think what we're saying here about mental health is the most important message we can give, which is a lot of myths, a lot of misinformation, a lot of belief that somehow there isn't a place in our community for people with mental health, and frankly, all of that is a stigma and untrue. And I'm looking forward to having you come back in just a few minutes when Paul Goulet is going to join us for some news and the poll of the week. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Jackie Thornhill, for joining us and for inspiring not just me, but hopefully everybody who got to hear you today. We'll be right back with Inclusion Revolution here on Eastlink.